Welcome to episode 74 of From the Shed End podcast with myself, T.Dot, as always. Theo, how you doing?
Yeah, not bad, thanks. I think it's that time of the year. I mean, I say time of the year, it's November, but usually we'd be anticipating a World Cup around June time. But really looking forward to the weekend. Qatar, Ecuador, I think it's the first and probably the last ever time I'll be watching that fixture. But nevertheless, I'm really looking forward to it and buzzing for the World Cup, despite all the controversy and the build up to this tournament. I'm still really excited. I'm going to try to put that behind me. Shame it's not really beer garden weather here in the UK to enjoy the games, but yeah, still buzzing for it. How are you doing?
Yeah, not bad. Let yourself, I think it was only recently, I can't remember if I said it to you or someone else, but it was only recently, since the squads were being announced, that I started to get a buzz. Before it just wasn't the same, it wasn't the same as the summer. I agree with you, beer garden weather, all of that stuff. But as the squads are coming out, I saw there was a couple of sort of warm-up games. I think Portugal had one last night, and there was a couple. Obviously, Armando Broja, I think he's back in London, looking at his ankle because he obviously damaged his ankle. But apart from that, I'm looking forward to the World Cup. I think there's going to be some really good fixtures, which we'll get on to. But before we do all of that, as always, customary for me to say the same stuff I say every single week. If you haven't done so already, please go and subscribe to the channel. And also, if you click the Linktree link in the description, it will take you straight to our social accounts and all the other podcast episodes that we've done over the last 2 years. So make sure you do that for us. And before we get on to the World Cup, obviously, we can't really do a podcast without talking about Cristiano Ronaldo, who seems to always crop up and pop up in Chelsea podcast and other podcasts, but not too much about the interview, but just in terms of it looks more than likely he's not going to be a Manchester United player when he comes back from the World Cup, simply because of how the interview ended last night. He didn't say yes or no, but it's an 80-20% he's not staying at Manchester United. We said in the summer he was a top target for Todd Boehly. Todd Boehly was very keen on him at the time. Obviously, Thomas Tuchel apparently wasn't. Graham Potter claims that he's still not 100% convinced by Ronaldo. I'm still sticking to by what I said in the summer. I think he's a really good player, but he comes with a lot of baggage, i.e. Piers Morgan interviews. What's your thoughts on it? Has it changed since the summer, or is it the same as it was before?
I mean, it's very hard to say no to a player like Ronaldo because we know what he can provide to teams. It's goals. I feel he's probably the main reason. He's the main reason that United finished amongst the top 6 last season. Second top goal scorer, I think, only behind Heung-min Son, if I'm correct. So he can score goals. He knows where the back of the net is, which seems to have been a recurring problem for Chelsea since the likes of Drogba and Costa have left. We haven't really had that prolific goal scorer. However, he's 37. He is 37. Sure, he looks after himself to the point where he can play up to the age of 37 at the highest level. But we need to start planning for the future. We've still got players like Azpilicueta, Aubameyang, Thiago Silva, who are on the wrong side of 30. And they've got a couple more seasons left in them. And I don't think we should be kind of carrying on buying these type of players. I do always say we need to look at players who have experience. But for me, experience is when you're kind of late 20s, that age where we got Fabregas and Diego Costa in. They've gained that experience in another league and they've proven themselves. And now they're able to play in the Premier League. Whereas Ronaldo, now he's 37. I've seen he's being linked to Inter Miami, to the Australian league now. And I think maybe we just need to be realistic and say, sure, he's an amazing player. He'll sell us millions pounds worth of shirts. And his commercial value is probably the highest in the world. But it's just not really the vision that we want to be going in. I highly doubt that I really think that if we do sign him, it will be a Todd Boehly signing, not a Graham Potter signing. And I think that's where that kind of Tuchel sacking probably initially started. That kind of, they didn't really have that aligned vision between Boehly and Tuchel. And that's the last thing we want now, is to have that kind of same kind of tension or kind of conflict when it comes to transfers and vision between Potter and Todd Boehly.
Yeah, I think the fact that Paul Winstanley's coming as well, basically the foundations that we spoke about in the summer, the players that the staff that we needed to bring in, essentially move on some of them as well. It seems like Graham Potter's getting what he needs to be able to go into the next 2 summer windows in the transfer window, to bring in those players. And you're looking at the profile of Brighton's profile. You look at the players that they've brought. None of them are really of that age. I know it's a different caliber. They can't attract maybe a Cristiano Ronaldo or a Leon or Messi, whoever. They can attract that level of player. But even looking at some of the players of science, they're all 28 below. Maybe they don't really go for the 30 plus. So I think that's going to be a thing of the past. Buying a Patrick Aubameyang or even a Thiago Silva. I don't think we'll see someone like that coming through the Chelsea doors anytime soon. I think that the idea and the plan is to try and build youth, build them up, bring them through with a bit of experience, of course, of in terms of I don't know, someone who's in their 28, someone who's in their late 20s, bring them in, add that experience. But I think it's going to be a youthful looking Chelsea side going forward, and I think that's the idea and the projects that I think Bowley vision that he's got aligns with Potter. You look at the backroom staff that he's brought in from Brighton. I think Paul Winstanley's going to be a really key part of that as well. But I agree with you. I think Ronaldo comes in and causes a lot of chaos at Chelsea, which there has already been chaos. You look at going back to Abramovich, Tuchel, some of the players, Lukaku, there's been so much chaos over the last 2 years. So to add to that, when you're trying to do a rebuild, which is what the phase that we're in, would just be silly, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. I think we've had our fair share of chaos in the last couple of years, and the last thing we want is to add Cristiano Ronaldo to that pot and kind of continue to stir it in a way. And we saw that he is capable of kind of not listening to the hierarchy and doing these type of interviews, which I've just read now might mean that his contract will be terminated and he's not welcome back at Carrington. So, I think that's the last thing we want. But there's still a tiny part of me that would just love to see him in a Chelsea shirt. And I know that he will kind of be ready to kind of score goals, but it will be more of a short plan, which is not what we need right now.
If you didn't have Aubameyang, I think I'd agree with you to an extent, but I just think we're drying up on goals. We look at Sterling, who started the season well, but we are crying out for someone who can put the ball in the back of the net. But I think going forward, there's going to be options. Look at Nkunku, who hopefully will be signing shortly, but I just can't see it. I can't. And to be honest, I think looking at Lukaku's interview, looking at Ronaldo, it shows that some players do actually believe they are better or they're in a different period in their career than they actually are. You look at Lukaku, who thinks he was a lot better than Chelsea at the time and gone back to Inter. And, you look at Ronaldo saying he doesn't respect Ten Hag and, that respect isn't reciprocated. He doesn't believe he should come on, in 3 minutes to go in the game. To me, the ego's up there, the players down there. So, it's still a no from me, but I don't want to dwell on Ronaldo. He's not a Chelsea player. It'd be good when he is announced at another club. I can't see him going back to United, but I do want to spend, and we did say we're going to spend some time looking at the World Cup. Kicks off on Sunday, as you said, Qatar, Ecuador, as you said. Don't think you're ever going to see that game or fixture again, but let's just look at the group stages, because I looked at this earlier this week. There's some tasty fixtures just in the group stages. What group stands out to you? You looking on there now, from A to H, which of those groups do you think, I can't wait to see that game? And I've got my own personal favorite, but what's yours?
I think personally, every single one of those groups is well balanced. There's always kind of a team you expect to finish top, but there's always maybe another two teams that will be fighting for that second spot. Obviously, for me, the game that stands out is maybe in Group E, Spain, Germany. I think it was a semi-final back in 2010. And I think both teams are kind of going through transition periods at the moment with their kind of the youth players that they're bringing up and the kind of the more experienced players, the likes of Busquets and Thomas Müller, maybe playing in their last World Cup potentially. So I think that's a very exciting game to watch. Also, we've got a couple of Chelsea boys in that fixture, and the likes of Azpilicueta and Kai Havertz. Being an England fan, I'm really looking forward to all the England games, particularly Monday, England-Iran, 1 p.m. in the Qatari heat. That should be a kind of an interesting one. And then I think Group G, I think any team that's got Brazil in it, and I think Serbia for me are a big underdog. You look at their squad, they've got Vlahovic, they've got Tadic, they've got Mitrovic, they've got Milinkovic-Savic in midfield, they've got Kostic, they've got Luka Jovic. I think they could easily, do a Croatia back in 2018 and maybe at least make the semis or something. So I expect maybe them to snatch some points off Brazil and maybe finish second in the group. So I think Brazil-Serbia for me is a really nice fixture. And just for the kind of sake of, the memories from 2010. Ghana, Uruguay, I think, because of the handball with Suarez.
Yeah,
I think
crazy. Yep.
Yeah, I think the Ghanaians are going to want to have their revenge in that fixture. So I think that's a really tasty fixture as well.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's definitely well balanced. I look at Group C. I'm looking for, and maybe because it's just a South American fixture, but Argentina and Mexico. I think obviously Argentina should come out on top, but I think that's going to be a really good, and Poland as well. You look at Poland's team, which we'll look at some of the squads shortly, but I think that's a good group. Mexico, Argentina. One of the things that I kind of, when I looked at the groups, I mean, I'll put my hands up. I don't really know much about Qatar or Iran or Saudi Arabia, but a lot of those players, I think, especially for Qatar, and I think maybe Iran as well, both of them are, there's very little players that are playing within Europe, I think, in those two nations. So, they'll be used to the climate, they'll be used to the heat over there, which you just mentioned before, and I think a lot of the time, countries that go into these tournaments who are classed as the underdog sometimes actually surprise everyone and do really well. So I'm looking forward to seeing. I mean, Group B. I mean, that's anyone's to take. I know a lot of people think England are just going to breeze through that, but Wales are a really good team. If you think back to the Euros with Scotland and England, and it wasn't an all. Everyone thought England will walk past Scotland easily, and it wasn't the case. You look at USA, very good squad. I think people are overlooking them as well. And Iran, like I said, I don't think people realize, because they're the team that might not know much about, are just assuming, that it's going to be an easy job. But I think Group B is very difficult for England as well. I don't think it's a case of topping the group. I think, I said we're going to fixture shortly, but if Wales win their first two games or USA win their first two games, it's not an all-and-gone conclusion for England at all.
No, definitely. And just touching on Iran being maybe a Middle Eastern team, they'll be used to playing in the heat. The kind of the Middle Eastern heat. And I think one player that just stands out for Iran is Taremi from Porto, who's really, really good. I think he scored a bicycle kick against Chelsea back when we won the Champions League in the quarterfinals. So we have to keep an eye out for him. But yeah, I think completely agree. Wales and USA probably being slight underdogs in that group. They'll just, they'll play with nothing to lose. Wales particularly have that rivalry with England, and USA. I think I was looking at their squad on paper the other day. It's not too shabby. It's not too shabby. And Pulisic seems to turn up when he plays for the American national team. They've got a couple youngsters in there. I think it's Giovanni Reina from Borussia Dortmund, who's quite an exciting prospect. So I think, like you said, Group B's really enough is quite an exciting one.
Yeah, I'm just going to bring the squads up now. So obviously we've got the key fixtures here. Obviously, I mean, I look at that there. I mean, if Wales or USA, I mean, that's a really good opening game there in terms of, Wales and USA. So if USA win against Wales, beat England, it's all to play for, really. I think it's not a foregone conclusion, but I just want to talk about the squads because, again, some of these squads will have changed. I think, obviously, Mane is now missing the World Cup as well, which we'll get onto. But just looking at the England squad, I mean, it's surprises for you that you look at how many defenders have gone, the defenders that have gone, very limited options in midfield as well. But is there anyone that sort of stands out in that squad, or you think should be in the England team?
I think there's maybe three names if you're basing this kind of selection purely on merit that don't deserve to be there. And I think that's Connor Cody, Harry Maguire, and Calvin Phillips, potentially. He's only played, I think, 14 minutes of Premier League football this season. Potentially Conor Gallagher, maybe as well. He hasn't really done much so far at Chelsea. He's played maybe one game out of three, if you're basing this on minutes. But I think the kind of ones that definitely should be in there, or maybe in terms of defenders, are potentially Fikayo Tomori from AC Milan. I think we touched upon this last time on the pod, but he deserves to be there ahead of Cody and Maguire. And another one is maybe Mark Wehi from Crystal Palace, who's been superb, and I think he was in the last England squad for the friendlies back in October. So he's another name that's been very unlucky to miss out. Otherwise, I think I agree with all the selection. I kind of agree with Callum Wilson being in there, maybe ahead of Ivan Toney. There's been a bit of controversy recently around Ivan Toney, so you do wonder if Southgate was aware of that during his selection. Yeah. But also, Wilson's a brilliant penalty taker. And once we get to the round of 16, quarterfinal semis, there's the opportunity of playing of a penalty shootout. and you'll want a Callum Wilson in there to smash it in alongside Harry Kane. So I think he's a really good option to have off the bench as well. But no, I think no real surprises. I think I was expecting, as soon as the squad was to be released, lots of people to be disappointed and the fan bases to be divided. But I think overall, Southgate's maybe made the right decisions, other than Tomori being the big player to miss out.
Yeah, I think, and I think his sort of rationale behind it doesn't make sense as well. The fact that, especially, I think it was more so Tammy Abraham, which we touched on last week as well. But looking at those defenders, I would say he's going to play three at the back with the wing backs, because it's heavily stacked with defenders. What worries me is he expecting Trent to be a wing back when he's predominantly used to playing right back? He's not expecting to defend as much. There's a lot of work then expected of the three centre backs if Trent isn't tracking back as well. Very costly, I think, if you're going into the quarterfinals, those knockout games with someone who isn't defensively minded as much as Trent is. But obviously, Carl Walker's there, Kieran Trippier as well. Two good options. I wanted to ask you, away from that though, around the midfields, because if it is a five at the back, you look at those midfielders, is it more so maybe a Jude Bellingham alongside Declan Rice in that midfield? Do you leave out Jordan Henderson, who has that experience of being almost the Liverpool captain, the voice for Liverpool on the pitch as well?
Yeah, I think if we go back to Euro 2020, but 2021, I think we were playing a Phillips alongside Declan Rice, if I'm not mistaken. And I think Henderson only came off the bench a couple of times. And I was actually rewatching the England goals on YouTube the other day, and I think he scored off the bench against Ukraine in the quarters. But yeah, I'd expect it to be a midfield duo of Rice and Bellingham. I think Bellingham, but don't watch much of Borussia Dortmund, but from what I've seen, he's been superb, particularly in the Champions League. And again, I think one of those players that, sure, I think he's only 18, 19, playing in his first international tournament, or maybe second international tournament, but I think he'll just hit the ground running in this tournament, and probably add a couple bucks to his price tag going into the summer as well. So I think he'll be a really big player to have in his team, and probably the first name on the team sheet alongside Harry Kane.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I want to quickly talk about Iran, some of the other countries in the group, but as I said, I think there's a lot of players there that are, I don't watch much Greek football, but they could easily top the group. I know it sounds mad, but I think everyone just doubts the fact that Iran are a team that we don't really know much about. But you look at the group, it's very open. I think it's probably arguably the most open group in out of A to H. I don't think there's a more open group, in my opinion, but maybe that's just because England are in there. I'm sort of optimistic that other teams can do well, but we don't know, do we? We really don't know.
No, for sure. I think we automatically assume that maybe Iran on that team, that Wales, USA, and England will get 3 points from that game. But if you watch the Netflix documentary called Captains, and it follows the Lebanese captain, and he plays against the Iranian national team a few times, and Iran are kind of seen as the big team in the Asian kind of continent when it comes to the qualifiers, and the team that always finish top and get automatically qualified for the World Cup. So it's going to be quite a tough fixture. And like I said, they'll be used to the conditions and the heat. A couple standout names there. Taremi, like I mentioned, I think Saman Goudos from Brentford, who would be used to playing some of the English players. I'm seeing a player from Dinamo Zagreb in there as well. I think Mohar Rami. Don't know who he is, but Dinamo Zagreb, again, quite a well-respected team across Europe. Play them in the Champions League. So I think, like you said, it's going to be a very open group, and I'm expecting a tough game, kind of England-Tunisia vibes from the World Cup in 2018 on Monday.
Yeah, definitely. Quickly, before we move on to a different group, but as you said about Spain, USA, really good squad. I like their squad, and I think they are, again, a team that maybe underestimated. There's some really good experienced players in there, not just across the Premier League, but across, some in America and some in Europe as well. So I think we, as England fans, we rule out other teams because we expect England to beat them, but no guarantee at all. No guarantee.
2010, I think it was the opening game was a 1-1, I think, of the USA. And that was arguably a much better USA team. They had the likes of Clint Dempsey, Landon Donovan, Tim Howard. I'm looking at still looking at this team. It's still very strong. You got your Weston McKennie there from Juventus. You've got Giovanni Reina, like I mentioned, Tim Way from LOSC Lille, Josh Sargent, who I think was probably the standout player for Norwich last season. So yeah, very good team. Tim Ream as well as their centre back, experienced USA veteran, plays for Fulham. Going to be a very tough. Yeah, I honestly think the England USA game might be the toughest of the group for England.
Yep, and that's the middle game, I think, for England as well. So if they lose against Iran or don't pick up the 3 points, you're going into that USA game almost as a must win. You don't want to be going into that Wales game needing to beat Wales to go through. So I think that's going to, I say it's the most open group for me out of them, if I'm honest. But just try and go back. Let's find out where we get back to the other ones in a minute. But I'm just trying to assess around Mbappe, who, if you think about how he played in the Euros, didn't really have the best Euros. Surely, he's obviously matured slightly since then, but he's got to do better, surely, in this World Cup.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really care. I think France, for me, are that international team that I like. Arsenal, all my friends are French and support the French national team. So he could get 0 goals for all I care, and I'll be happy. But no, I think he's aiming to get the Ballon d'Or next year, especially now that Messi and Ronaldo, past their peak, and you're looking at a new kind of crop of players to win the Ballon d'Or. I think he'll have a very good World Cup, and he'll be the standout player for France. He's had a brilliant first half of the season. So yeah, I think he'll be going into this tournament expecting to be amongst maybe the Golden Boot winners, and hopefully for him, not for us, but get France past the group stages and well into the knockout rounds.
Yeah, I think he has to. I think he's got to have definitely a better tournament than the last one anyway. I think he blew a blank at that one. But you've got the Brazil shirt on. It's only right that we talk about the favourites. I think they were 4-1 last time I checked to win the World Cup. Massive favourites going into this tournament. And just looking at the squad, I mean, it's, again, you can't even single out any area in the squad which you think, okay, yeah, the defence looks a bit weak. The midfield's a bit. I mean, it's where could you go wrong with this squad? I mean, it's all over.
It's such a good team. On paper, it's probably the best team of the lot. And again, if you watch that Captains documentary on Netflix, Brazilian fans expect Brazil to win the tournaments every 4 years. They've got high expectations. And I think this is probably since 2014, the year where they really expect this team to go all the way. They've got Thiago Silva, I think, who I mentioned in the last pod, will be playing his last ever international tournament. I'll be captaining the side.
You never know. I mean, he might squeeze one more.
You never know with him. You never know. The Benjamin Button of Brazilian football. But But you got Dani Alves there as well, who I think a player you would have expected to have played his last World Cup in 2018. Then midfield, you've got Bruno Guimaraes, who we spoke about last time, Casemiro, Fabinho, Fred, who I think is very underrated. And then it's their striking options for me: Vinicius, Rafinha, Neymar, Martinelli, Jesus, Antony. I mean, which front three do you pick? You could literally draw 3 names out of a hat and it will be a world-class front three. So, I think, like you said, well-deserved favourites. And I expect them to at least be in the final, given that squad.
Yeah, I'd be very, very... I mean, if you're a betting pen, I'd be very disappointed if you did not back Brazil in this World Cup, just based on... obviously England will see us go as far as possible, but I just look at that squad and it's crazily, it's just brilliant all over. There's no even goalkeepers. I mean, who do you choose out of Alisson and Ederson in goal? Who would you put in goal? I mean, you've got the luxury of 2 world-class, let's call them that, goalkeepers in goal. You've just spoken about the forward, the attacking line. Martinelli's in decent form. Jesus is in decent form. Neymar, you can't leave him out. Vinicius Junior as well. It's just the fixtures. I mean, the opening fixture is of who you mentioned earlier, is Serbia, who you mentioned about their squad as well. I mean, just again, some of the players in that squad very much again underdogs going into the tournament. But what a squad!
What a squad! And I think, if I'm not mistaken, they finished above Portugal in the groups, which meant Portugal had to play that kind of playoff round against Macedonia. But yeah, such a good squad, really, really good squad, very underrated, and kind of going into the groups as underdogs, which I think would do them in the world of good because they've got probably not as high expectations. But yeah, you got Vlahovic from Juventus, Tadic, who's an experienced player now, still proving that he can do it in the Dutch league with Ajax. Mitrovic, who I think is a superb player. He's physical, big lad as well. Milinkovic Savic, who's always been linked to Chelsea, Manchester United in midfield. So yeah, I think very good player. And I think Brazil, Serbia, I think it's that one that I'll be circling in my calendar to watch amongst the first round of fixtures for sure.
Yeah, Thursday, 7 p.m.
Good. So I'll be finished work.
Yeah, definitely get the beers out of that one. But I've just noticed some games are kicking off at 10 a.m., which is, I mean, it's good, but yeah, it's an early start, isn't it? I think for some of these games. Yeah, it's a bit of a slug if you've been up the night before. But I want to quickly touch on Switzerland, who I think as well that have got a relatively decent squad. I don't think they'll get out of it. You know, Dennis Zakaria has been chosen to be part of that World Cup squad, but do you give them any chance to potentially get out of the group at least? You know, Granit Xhaka's put in some good performances, but again, they do have some really good European experience across the team, from goalkeepers to attackers.
Yeah, I mean, no disrespect to Cameroon because I think they're the fourth team in this group, but I think second spot will be contested amongst Switzerland and Serbia for sure. And you look at Switzerland, they knocked out France at the Euros only last summer. They're a very good team. Granit Xhaka, another player who gets a lot of criticism, but I think he's very underrated, and probably the leader amongst the Swiss national team. Decent goalkeepers as well. We mentioned Ederson and Alisson. I'm seeing there they've got Philip Kuhn, who's the Salzburg keeper. We know about him. And they've got Jan Sommer from Mönchengladbach, who's their go-to keeper, I think. And then they've got Gregor Kobel, who's the young Borussia Dortmund keeper who we'll be seeing, I think, a fair bit of in February and March next year. So yeah, very good team. Shaqiri, they've got Mbolo, they've got Xhaka, like I mentioned, Zakaria, Djibril Sow from Eintracht Frankfurt. Shaqiri. So yeah, I think another team, and a lot of these players that I've listed have already played some big international tournaments, the likes of Euro 2016, the World Cup 2018, and probably Euro 2020 as well. So I think it's going to be the Switzerland-Serbia games, another exciting one to watch for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Now, going into these group stages, I don't want to say which teams will get out their groups, but who could you see realistically in the final for the World Cup? Who would you potentially like to see, I suppose, is the better question out of the groups that we've got. I mean, everyone's sort of crying for an Argentina final, which I think is the Messi and Neymar scenario. Two big South American countries as well going head to head with each other. But what would be your ideal, realistic final?
I think, if I'm not mistaken, it has to be one team from each side of the tree. Is that right? So I think an England-France final, for instance, not possible. Whereas a Brazil-Argentina final is. I definitely think there's going to be a South American team in there. Whether that be Brazil or Argentina, I think it's more likely to be Brazil, given the squad that we just looked at and the quality of that squad. I feel like Portugal as well, big underdogs. They comfortably won 4-0 against Nigeria yesterday. Obviously underdogs, but they're still kind of seen in high regards, but decent side as well. Beat Nigeria 4-0. Bruno Fernandes played really well. Cristiano Ronaldo as well.
Defending was poor though. The Nigerian defending was all
they did. True, but Cristiano Ronaldo probably might be playing for that final move of his career as well, so that might play on his mind. But again, I don't think a Brazil-Portugal final is possible. So let's just say let's go with Argentina-Brazil. I think from a neutral point of view, it'd be an amazing final to watch because we don't actually have the kind of commitment, I think, to watch all the Copa America games when these sides actually do play each other. But I think in a World Cup final, I can't remember the last time it's ever happened, a Brazil-Argentina final. And like you said, Neymar against Messi, so many quality players meeting. It'd be a really nice watch for sure. But as much as I want to say England, I don't think they'll make the final this year. Just purely based on everything we saw before that second half of England-Germany, it just wasn't promising at all. So, and I still think we lack a leader in the team. we've got that good mix between youth and experience. But then you're looking at a Kyle Walker or Jordan Henderson to kind of lead the team, or a Harry Maguire, maybe even a Kane. It's just not really a Thiago Silva. It's not a Lionel Messi. It's not a Gerrard, John Terry, Lampard that we used to have back in the day. So I think we do lack a leader to really take us to the final. And as much as I like Southgate, he's not the man for the job, I think, for beyond this World Cup. So I'm going to say Brazil, Argentina. What are your feelings on the final?
No, I think that would be the most. I mean, I think that's. I have the teams. I think that's the most likely. I think as well. We haven't touched on Argentina, but we will do in a minute. But I just think Brazil, like we've just looked at their squad. I mean, where can you find any flaws in there? You can't. There's no holes in there, no gaps in that team at all. I think it'd be a good final as well. I think sometimes you watch finals, especially going back to some of the Champions League finals, and the build up to them is the best part. When you actually get into the game, it doesn't live up to the expectation. But I think with an Argentina-Brazil final, both Brazil and Argentina would be up for that. They it's almost up there. I mean, I think the Copa America. I'm going to be honest. I reckon the Copa America is probably would mean more to them as opposed to winning a World Cup, because it's. I mean, South American football, as you know, you've been over there recently, is like a religion. Do you know what I mean? It's like it's really seriously over there. It's taken serious. So I think yes, winning the World Cup is brilliant, and they would love that. But I think Copa America is just up there, just as much as the World Cup, in my opinion. So I think both are going to do this. Like you said, Messi as well has come out and said he's thinking of retirement as well. So final World Cup for Messi. And what a way to go out if you can either win it or at least get to the final with the opportunity to win it.
Yeah, for sure. Like you said, it's like a religion for the fans. And I think they've been not the actual fake fans that are being paid to support teams, but the real the real Brazilian and Argentinian fans have been out in Qatar for the last week or two, just kind of, taking in the atmosphere and, building it up towards their first fixtures. So I think they'll be really up for kind of creating that kind of football atmosphere you want for a final ahead of their games, for sure.
Yeah, let's just quickly touch on Senegal, who's a team that I tipped before the injuries to Mali. Who did really well, African Cup of Nations as well. I see them far, and I know it's a crazy thing, but you look at their group. They've got Ecuador, Qatar, and Netherlands, who I don't think have got the strongest squad. I look at them and people will say yes, they've got some really good, but you look at this squad here, and I just think. Why not? Look at Mendy in goal. Obviously now they have lost Sadio, but they still have some really good striking options, going forward. That midfield looks really good as well. I just don't see how they can't get out that group. I don't see what's not possible for them to get out that group. What's your thoughts on Senegal?
100% agree. I think they've got probably the easiest group of the tournament. No disrespect to Qatar and Ecuador, but you'd expect Netherlands and Senegal to finish first and second, and probably even Senegal to maybe finish above Netherlands. I would have said that before the Mane injury, but given the news yesterday, it might be slightly trickier for them, but you still expect them to come out the group. I'm looking at some of the players there. Koulibaly, we know all about. Edouard Mendy as well, who hasn't played a lot of football this season, but will probably want to be the first choice at the World Cup, and he probably deserves to be the first choice still. You've got the likes of Diallo,
as well.
Is Malassar from Watford, who I think don't really know what he's still doing at Watford. If I'm honest, he should be in the Premier League or one of the top leagues in the world. And as well, we haven't mentioned it, but they only won, I think it was the African Cup of Nations, was in January. So they know how to win these tournaments. They won a few penalty shootouts along the way. I think they knocked out Egypt in the playoff round. So, I think they'll be probably one of my underdog teams that I'd put in the same bracket as Serbia.
Very good, strong squad. Very, very strong squad. Just before we kind of start wrapping up, we haven't spoken really, or we haven't looked at the squad of Argentina. So I just wanted to quickly do that now and see what their group's like as well.
We should do our shock kind of exit as well, I think, before we wrap up.
Yeah. I mean, I think I've got one in my head already, but I mean, again, look at that squad. I mean, it's a really good, again, well-balanced squad. From goalkeeper to strikers, they've got everything in there. They've got really good players that they can bring off the bench if you think about who might start their games. But what's your thoughts on Argentina's squad itself as opposed to where they'll finish or maybe get into the final?
I think every single World Cup we've watched previously with Argentina, their main flaw has been their defense. It's been quite leaky, and there's never been kind of a world-class defender that stands out for Argentina. Maybe you had Gabriel Heinz back in the day, but since then there wasn't really kind of a standout one. Whereas this year they've probably got a very solid back four, and their centre backs being, I think, Romero and Martinez might be the two main ones that they'll start. Then they've got Messi for me, who's having a really good season, especially compared to the kind of average one he had last year. Di Maria is probably still in that team. I'm trying to think of some other names. I think a lot of some exciting young players that have from I think it's Benfica. I think feature in the Argentinian squad as well. But yeah, I think just as well, kind of maybe not as kind of talented as the Brazilian squad, but again, very passionate. I think good balance between youth and experience, and fans as well play a big part. I think, you look at these Argentinian fans, and they'll probably would have saved up since the World Cup was announced in Qatar to be able to travel and support their team. So I think they'll play a big part as well, and probably be the 12th man when they play their games.
Yeah, no, it'd be decent to see that. Just realised I'm not actually sharing, am I? So you can't actually see the team. That would have helped.
Maybe why I was struggling to list some names.
But no, here's it's because I've got too many windows open. But I mean, name is there. Obviously, Otamendi, so they've got the experience there as well. Like you mentioned, Romero, Martinez as well from Manchester United. Tagliafico still in the team as well. Acuna in defence. Alvarez going forward with Dybala and Messi as well. So and Martinez from Inter Milan. So they've got some really good depth in the squad, players that they can bring in as well. Surprise call up, or maybe not surprise if you're Argentinian, but McAllister as well from Brighton in the squad. So they've got a relatively good squad, and I think, as I said, Messi will want to, if it is his last World Cup, he'll want to go out on a high. You think back to the Copa America as well. I think that was one of the big things. I don't know if you've seen a clip of Messi giving the team talk at halftime in the dressing room and sort of saying, that you've had to leave your children, you've had to, commit to this and do all these things just to get to this point here in the Copa America, go out there and leave everything out there. You can kind of sense he might do something similar in this World Cup, especially if it's his last as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think he'll probably be almost like a second coach during this tournament. And like I said, perfect balance between youth and experience. And he'll probably be seen as that kind of, experienced figure that the youth players can go up to and learn from during the tournament. I think I saw Carrera's name mentioned there. I think he got injured in the last couple of days. And there's talks of Garnacho, I think, coming in to replace him. So another exciting young player as well that might learn a lot from this tournament.
Last group before we do our shocks. We'd love to go through all the groups of all the teams, but there's just not enough time in the day to do that. But Spain, another squad that I'm looking forward to seeing anyway. I thought that said Neco Williams and it's Nico. I had to sit down and film from sure. But really good squad again. You look at the squad they've got there, a lot of experience in terms of some of the players that are going who've been in these major tournaments before. You look at Azpilicueta, Carvajal, Busquets, some players that have been at this top level playing at the major tournaments. But do they stand a chance? I mean, I still might have them down as not a shock to maybe a shock to not actually get out their group, to be fair. What's your thoughts?
Possibly. I mean, it's quite a similar squad to the one we saw, I think, in the Euros last summer. And to be fair, I think they got to the semis, and that was quite unexpected, given that I was struggling to even recognise some of the names. I didn't know, for instance, who Unai Simon was before the tournament, their goalkeeper. And it's a very different squad to what we used to see back in the past. That golden era of Spanish football from 2008 to 2012, when it would just be Barcelona and Real Madrid players. Whereas now it seems to kind of be a mix of, you've got some Valencia names in there, some Bilbao names, some Sevilla names, and a couple, of the English players that play in England at least. Very excited to watch Pedri and Gavi. I think they're really two really exciting players, probably future Ballon d'Or winners. I still feel like it lacks something. You look at those strikers, there's not one that you're going to be like, yeah, he can get me a goal at any point in the game. You're probably looking at Ferran Torres or Morata for the goals, and are they real goal scorers? And, do you want them in the big games? I don't think so. And you've got Marco Asensio, who hasn't been playing a lot of football as well. He's in the team. So, I'd expect them to get out the group.
And Fati as well.
And Fati,
And
he's
Fati,
been injured.
Yeah.
He's been injured for a big part of the season. And then even their goalkeepers, they're not obviously Kepa being injured, but you'd probably still pick De Gea. You'd still probably pick De Gea. He was there in the last World Cup. You've got Unai Simon, Robert Sanchez, David Raya, 3 brilliant keepers with their feet. But you want to go with a bit of experience, and that probably is David De Gea for me.
No, I have to agree. As I said, I think they're my shock in the World Cup. I think they have some really good players in there, some experienced players, but you said, I think Morata actually did okay at the Euros, if I remember. I think he scored a couple of key goals. But yeah, they haven't anything else. If Morata are doing it on the day, they haven't got anything else. Maybe like you said, Ferran Torres, but they haven't got much in that squad that I think, okay, yeah, they can go on to win it. We haven't mentioned Laporte as well, but defensively, I think they're okay. But that midfield, the forwards that they've taken, said De Gea's not gone as well. I just think, they should get out of that group. I'm not saying they shouldn't, but as I've said, many times before when we spoke about England, it's not a guarantee that they will, and I think they might struggle. I think they might struggle in that group. So they're my shock country to go out of the World Cup very early, first playing home, last plane to probably arrive. But what's yours? Who's your team that you're thinking may struggle, especially to get out of their group, get knocked out early?
I've got a big smile on my face because I think it could be France. There's been a lot of injuries to their squad, a lot of problems in the kind of build up to the World Cup. And Cuckoo, I think, is just pulled out as the latest player to be injured. Benzema, as good as he is, I don't think he's been as good in the first maybe 4 or 5 months of the season as he was towards the back end of last season. And I don't think he really sees eye to eye with Olivier Giroud either. And I probably think this is probably the easiest group for them, other than Group A. But I think Denmark will finish above them. They played each other twice in the Nations League, and Denmark came up, beat them twice. I think one of them was a 3-0 win as well. So and probably as soon as you finish second in your group, you're probably going to play, I think it's an Argentina next. So that type of caliber of team. A lot of players there on that list that are playing their first World Cup as well. A very different team to the one we saw in win the World Cup in 2018. I think not having N'Golo Kanté is a big loss for them. Huge loss. As good as Camavinga and Tchouaméni are, again, maybe a bit too young, but they'll still add a bit of something. William Saliba as well has played a fantastic first half of the season. But I think I got almost like a bit of a PSG vibe. They got some big egos in that team, almost 2 big egos that might, just ruin the kind of dressing room, the likes of Benzema, the likes of even Kylian Mbappe, Ousmane Dembélé, those type of players. And I spoke to a lot of French fans as well, and they're not confident either. They're not confident. So I think they can maybe crash out in the round of 16 or quarters, which will be a shock given that they're the World Cup holders. And it's always that little curse around the World Cup holders. They never do as well. Spain 2014, Germany 2018. I think both those teams crashed out in the group stage. I think they're my shock team to exit early.
Yeah, this is why I'm looking forward to the World Cup, because I think there's a lot of teams that you potentially expect to go through to the latter stages. But I think, like you just said, there's a lot of egos. There's a lot of inexperienced, and when I say inexperienced, I mean who've never played at a major tournament as such as this. And you could even say that about a lot of, England's another prime example. You look at some of the players that have been picked there. This is their first major, their first World Cup, and they don't necessarily have that experience. And obviously to Qatar as well, some of these players are going to have to adapt to, the different weather conditions over there as well. But it's a group they should definitely get out of. Australia, Tunisia, and Denmark, they should get out of it. But you know, as we've seen before, and as I said about the Euros, you know, they didn't have the best of times there either. And yeah, it's not a done deal that they get out that group. So I can back you up with that one. I think defensively they look a bit shaky. I know they've, on paper, you look at some of those names, you think, yeah, you know, should be okay, but they look okay in their club, you know, the domestic clubs, because of who they're playing alongside, or, you know, who they've got in front of them. But you know, I look at that defense and I'd worry if I was you know, supporting France in the World Cup. I'd worry a lot, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I'd agree. And looking at his defenders, probably a couple red cards and mistakes in there, the likes of Kimpembe, Kunate. I saw another name that kind of worried me, Kunde as well. One that's a bit of a hothead. Yeah. I thought maybe are we fair to say that we dodged a bullet with him, Chelsea?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think he's. I mean, I don't want to say we dodged a bullet, but we definitely wouldn't have gained anything by having him in the club, if I'm honest. From what I've seen so far, I think you sort of picked it up a few times before he signed for Barca that he's not just a hothead, but he's very sort of he switches off quite a lot as well. But definitely the sort of picking up yellow cards or red cards at times as well. But I do think Koulibaly's the same, in the same bracket. Yeah, I've noticed a lot of the time he'll lunge in for a tackle that he doesn't need to, or he just makes a silly mistake that potentially could lead to a goal. And I think they're very similar. So I don't think we've gained by not having Koundé. I just think we've probably got the better end of which one, you know, the lesser of two evils. So
yeah.
But yeah, he hasn't been, I mean, I think that
I was going to say early booking
at centre back as well at Barca now. So
yeah, you mentioned that the other day, but yeah, could completely agree about Koulibaly and Koundé. The pair, if one of the two of them on a yellow card early in the game, is quite a scary kind of watch for the rest of the 90 minutes, and you'd probably expect them to be subbed off because they're kind of they lunge into challenges, and they do tend to be a bit reckless at times.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think we've chosen two decent teams may struggle. Not to say that they won't get out the groups, but you can see them getting knocked out the knockout stages, just based on the experience, based on the players that they have in the team as well. But before we wrap up, it's only fair. I mean, we spoke about who will be in the final. We're going to take it one step further and say who is going to win the T22 World Cup, Qatar. I'll let you go first. If you really can't say any other team at the moment.
No, it's got to be Brazil. It's got to be Brazil. I've said it in 2010. I said it in 2014. I said it in 2018, and it didn't happen. 4 was my lucky number. So let's go for the 4th time in a row that I'm going to back Brazil to win the World Cup. I mean, back them with what I think is going to happen. But let's just stay optimistic and also hope England have a good tournament.
Yeah, I think, you know, obviously heart says England, but my head is saying Brazil. I mean, you look at the squad that we just spoke about. I'd be very, very surprised if they get knocked out anywhere before the semi-finals. They've got too good of a team to not be in that final. Yeah, I can't see it. So I'm going to go. I've backed them anyway. Like I said, 4-1 favourites. So I've backed them. Yeah, you know, got them in a sweet stake as well. So I'm double backed. But yeah, Brazil have got to win this one. I'd be shocked if they didn't. So yeah, looking forward to it now. Looking forward to it 100%. Kicks off on Sunday. I'm assuming they'll have like an opening ceremony and all that, but yeah, I'm literally not doing anything Monday. That's the first big game. Yeah, I mean, that's going to be a massive test. If we don't get 3 points there, like I said, you know, going into those Wales and USA games, it's going to be difficult to grab 6 points.
Yeah, I've got my work calendar open next to me. I've got a 2-hour lunch break blocked in to be able to watch the England game on Monday.
Yeah.
No one's bothering me during those 2 hours, so I'm not looking at my emails. But yeah, I've actually got Brazil in my sweepstakes too, so they'll be the second team I support after England. So we'll be united there.
There we go. Right. Okay. Well, it's good to not talk Chelsea for a week, although we did at the start. But yeah, it wasn't a depressing episode as it has been over the last couple of weeks. I'm sure they'll return after the World Cup. But Theo, as always, thank you very much for joining me. Always a pleasure. And anyone who is listening to this on the YouTube, or if you're on Spotify, you can watch it visually now as well. So if you're listening to either of those, make sure you go to YouTube and subscribe to the channel. And as I said at the start, if you hit the Linktree link in the description, it will take you to all our social accounts and all the other podcast episodes as well. Episode 74 from the shed end until, I was going to say until next week, until whenever we decide to record again. We'll be back soon, hopefully, with some more Chelsea content as well. But until then, stay safe and thank you very much for watching.